Hello and welcome to the aForm Show, the premier podcast for all things architecture and design across the MENA region. Welcome to your tribe. Hey, are you tired of specifying boring door hardware? If your ironmongery specs feel more meh than wow, it's time to have a look at EuroArt, the skilled British experts for door hardware, furniture fittings, glass fittings, and sliding doors that are taking your specification headaches away. From top quality pocket doors to leather wrap door handles, EuroArt offers hardware that's both durable and stunning for all budget levels. Whether you're designing or upgrading a residential or commercial project, their finishes such as satin, titanium blue, and gunmetal bring sophistication to any space. You need to match a finish or customize a pull handle to your customer's unusual design ideas? No worries, EuroArt has got you covered. For hardware that stands the test of time and looks great while doing it, visit euro-art.co.uk or send an email to hello@euro-art.co.uk or visit the EuroArt Design Center in Al Garhoud, Dubai for a touch and feel experience. Now, back to the episode. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. Today we are joined by Vijay Nambiar, Studio Director of Designsmith. Vijay is a highly experienced design professional with a large portfolio of award-winning work. His leadership has driven the studio's success in delivering cutting-edge, functional, and aesthetically refined spaces. Not to mention, he can totally drain a jump shot off the baseline. We are beyond excited to have him on the show, so without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Vijay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So while I'm pretty sure people are going to be like, what's a jump shot? We'll get into it in due time.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
Obviously, we've known each other for a while, so I want to get right into it.
Sure.
In all the discussions that we've had, I have found that this industry tends to have its most purest of conversations when we're at award shows, right? Whether we like to or not, that's kind of where it all goes down. And the common theme that I kind of noticed over the last few awards, I would think, is that we're kind of now starting to have a discussion about not what we can do well, but what we're kind of doing wrong. So that's what I want to start with you, which is, in your opinion, in this fabulous industry that we are at, obviously none of us are perfect. In your mind, what do you think we as designers, leaders, firms can be doing better?
I think, it's not entirely the industry's fault, but we are living in a time where people have a lot of resource available, right? And I say this because I kind of started before we had these resources available. So what I feel now is that before, the entire industry is kind of jumping on trends, right? You'll notice that at every awards, if there are 5 nominations, 3 kind of are similar, 2 stand out, 1 of them gets an award, right? Yeah. The problem is that you have resource, which means that either in your wish to kind of beat the competition, you have to look at them first, and that somehow ends up influencing what you do. So for example, design has trends in color, design has trends in this and that and whatever. But for example, every second project now has arches, right? And that's not a trend. It's just that people realize arches look cool. Now your clients start liking it and everybody starts doing it. If you had the ability to come up with a concept story, a narrative, whatever, which was devoid of inspiration that you kind of pick up from the internet, whether you think it's AI generated, whether it's Pinterest or whatever, I feel that the industry might become more original. And I'm not saying that not everybody's doing that. There are some phenomenal work coming out of this industry. And again, not all arches look bad. Right. But our reliance on external inspiration is way more than it ever was. There was a time when, for example, you had to actually go look at a book, right? Yeah. And books did not have, there were not books that said all projects that show arches. Exactly. But Pinterest does that. True. Right? So I think that's one of the things that I think we're doing wrong, where we rely too much on the resource, especially in the initial stage of design. And the other thing I think that's happening, which maybe even the best studios are kind of guilty of, is kind of generalizing the talent that comes into the market, right? So you want everybody to kind of do the things that you want to do. So when I hire someone for a studio, I'm basically looking for someone who can do what I want them to do. I'm not looking at a talent and saying, what is it that you bring to the table? Right. Because what's the point? We have people from all over the world. Right. If everybody comes to a studio and everybody does the same thing, then it doesn't make sense. These are 2 things I feel that need to be fixed, where we appreciate talent for what it is and not for it becoming a skill that you can hone, right? Because all of us tend to become mentors very quickly. Right. And the other is, like I said, resource. You stop looking at everything outside saying, how do I start?
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So just to play devil's advocate, right? From a studio point of view, I'm now talking about a studio that's, say, fairly established. They've been, 30, 40 years, for example, in the market. Not this market, but any market, really. That studio obviously over time develops a certain style, design stance, if you may, so to speak. So isn't it valid for them to then look for talent that aligns with that, rather than look for talent that could maybe dilute or diversify even what they've worked so hard to build?
Yeah, no, I agree. But it also depends on what you then are talking about, right? Like, are you saying design as in interior design? Are you saying design as in architecture?
Right.
Are you talking about public buildings? Are you talking about someone's residence? For example, irrespective of what your design style is, if you're designing the office for an MNC who has a very strong brand language,
right,
you're supposed to kind of end up using some of that.
True.
But typically this whole thing about, design studios, personality or style, you would say, for example, studios like Zahid's office, or, like, for example, I don't think even Foster has that kind of a defined language where I see a building, I'm like, I know this is Foster.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But Calatrava, yes.
Yes.
There's certain names that did that. Firstly, I don't think that is that much of a trend anymore because that kind of almost Starchitect. No, but there are, for example, Big, right?
Yeah, but Big still has like Bjarke kind of like.
No, I'm saying it's him all over, right? Like in the sense that people know because he is a legend and all of that. True. But for example, you could still not look at it and say, oh, this is exactly what they do every time.
True.
But Daniel Lipskin and all these guys, there's no doubt, Frank Gehry, all of them. So architecturally, I feel certain things of that sort can happen. And I agree that you might want to have talent that kind of can add to that brand value, right? But in interiors, it sometimes becomes different because one, depending on the type of project, if it is public spaces, you have the freedom to kind of come up with thoughts, right? But what if you're doing a commercial project? If you're doing someone's office, you will have a language. But for example, I couldn't say that I will only do deconstructivist design, but my client is basically a Japanese store. Right. So there is a bit of that. I feel we have gone past that stage where designers and architects kind of try to build their own studios, personalities so much so that they actually go beyond what is asked of them. But of course, I mean, if I had, Zahid as my architect and I tell her I want like Japanese minimal building,
probably not
she'll fire me, right? So yeah.
True. Interesting. I never really thought of it that way, I suppose. But yeah, makes sense. So kind of then moving forward, obviously, your role with Designsmith, you guys are obviously exposed to many types of projects, many scales of projects, and so on. My question is kind of around teams, because selfishly, that's kind of what I'm struggling with. So therefore, I find it fair to ask you. And it is something we kind of spoke about off air as well, right? This kind of sweet spot of having a design team. People who are out there who may be in a similar position thinking about, is my team getting too big? Is my team too small? When should I scale up? Should I scale up? Any thoughts on that?
I don't actually think, I wouldn't go to the extent of saying there is a sweet spot or there's a number that I think is working the best. But like we spoke about before, it depends a lot on what your studio's ambition is, right? Personally, for example, I feel that a studio of between 15 to 20, 25 is a fantastic kind of number to work with because it allows you a certain level of, community development within that. You can also focus on individual people and understand what they bring to the table instead of it becoming like a farm, where things are just happening. But I can't again say that this is what will work for everybody. There is a possibility that tomorrow I might do a project which is like a Burj Khalifa or for example, like Killa, they were much smaller and then they suddenly scaled up and now they're like the biggest names there. I don't think he could have sat there and said, I'm going to stay to 20 people, right? Because opportunities don't always come when you want them, right? So, but I feel the other big rule that I think should be followed and which sometimes is not followed and which also has caused the kind of, I think, downfall or slowing down of businesses is where the management doesn't scale up. The business scales up. You have 10 people becoming 20, becoming 40, but it's still run by one or two people who want to keep a control over the whole thing. Right. What then happens is you initially were able to manage 5 people and 10 people, but suddenly now you need a completely different skill set.
Gotcha.
At a business scale of 20, 30 people, like Designsmith, we were at 30, right? It's not just design that you're managing.
Yeah, it becomes
there's so much else, right?
HR comes into play.
Everything. I mean, HR is there, finances are there into it. You're now doing projections for year-on-year growth, right?
So a project which you have to take on because you kind of have to meet bottom lines kind of thing.
So it's generally a trend. I mean, people like to keep control, right? And then the minute you want to give that up, then you want another person who agrees to you.
Right.
Not that someone else is going to bring more value, right? And help you kind of do other things better.
Right.
So I think this is for me, that's a sweet spot. You keep a number into your mind that you can manage.
Right.
But if you think you want to grow bigger, then you need to be able to share your burden, but also then share the accolades that come with it. Right? You should be able to stand on a stage with 20 people saying it's fine. We are all like doing amazing work. Right. I don't need to be there all the time.
True. Makes sense. I actually had heard a podcast recently that spoke about this, and they had a very similar to what you're saying, but had a different metaphor to it in the form of, they said, when you have a company generally, you have people who are barrels, as in like gun barrels, and people who are ammunition, right? And every firm thinks that in order for us to grow, we need more ammunition, meaning we need more people. Therefore, if we're a company of 10, if we hire another 90, we're now a company of 100, we have 10x on paper. That's what they think should happen. But in reality, barrels are equally important to scale up along with ammunition, because you can have all the ammunition you want, but if you don't have the actual barrels firing them, you're still always going to be sort of bottlenecked and limited. So I found that to be quite a good analogy. And interesting fact, it turns out that whatever your company size is, the square root of that is actually the people that tend to bring more than 50% of value to the business. When I actually did the math and I thought about our studio, I was like, that's kind of true.
but this is the thing, right? So agreed that there's a certain percentage that brings value. What tends to happen is that from the outside, every studio, especially in a place like Dubai, every studio projects people. Right. So I want, for example, 3 people to be seen as my people, right? That doesn't mean that the remaining 17 are not doing well enough.
Right.
The problem is when you start putting value to only the barrel. Right. Ammunition is key. You need the barrel. You have to realize that some people might not need the push or the pat on the back, but they need to be acknowledged.
Right.
What happens in most businesses is that you will typically see there's 3, 4, 5 faces that keep popping up. It almost like if you ask the outside world, they'll be like, yeah, that studio has 3 people who do great work. Right. And that's impossible. Like I'm seeing CVs and portfolios now where there's one person doing a G plus 30 hotel. Right. And I have to ask them, like, what did you actually do?
Right.
Because it couldn't be.
Exactly.
Right? But then this is what happens. So I think you do require all of this together, but you do require to understand that there's a certain balance between the two. There might not be a hard ratio to, who brings what kind of value, but at any given time, if there's someone in that system who is not adding any value, then they leave. Right. And there's no kind of ill will, nothing. It's just that you might add great value somewhere else, but here you don't work. But that has to be how you look at it.
It is very true. And thank you for that metaphor, because this is a brilliant segue into what I really wanted to talk about, which is I have recently made a switch in thinking. For the longest time, I've always been fed the narrative and to some extent even believed it, that when you work for the studio, we're all in together, we're a family, right? To some extent, yeah, kind of true. But then I recently was told, if you kind of think about it slightly differently, makes a lot of things easier, which is instead of we are a family, we are a sports team.
100%.
And if you think about it from that point of view, the complete goals and ambitions change, because the purpose of a sports team is to win a championship. In order to win a championship, you need as many A players as you can across the entire board. So not just from your players, but even your coaches, your dietitian, your physician, all of that stuff. And if someone is not an A player or is a B player, they are then trained to either become an A player or are then told, listen, you can't make the cut. This is where we're going. And there's no ill feeling about it. There's no guilt about it. It's just, as professionals, this is what we do. And that change, it suddenly made me a lot more comfortable with many things where I'm like, yeah, it's okay. This is how we are. This is what we're going for. And that's fine. Whereas I suppose the notion of a family is that you kind of still tolerate that uncle who you don't really like very much just because you don't want to be mean.
There's so many of them.
But when you think of it as a sports team, I think it suddenly unlocks so much. The reason I want to ask you this question, because obviously basketball, big part of your life. Any translation from the court to the studio?
It might sound very cliche to say this, but I have told this to almost everybody who's ever worked with me, that I wouldn't be half the person I am. I'm not talking about design. I wouldn't be half the person I am if I wasn't on a sports team, right? Because everything that I can tell you now, I am sure I've seen some part of that in my sports life.
Right.
For example, you spoke about the team. There is, in basketball, you have 12 guys who play, right? There are 5 guys who start, 7 guys later. But the point is, the 13th guy irrespective of him being my brother, my father, my whatever, has to get better than the 12th guy to be on the team.
True.
Right? It doesn't matter. Right? If you make a team of friends and family, you're not going to win. Right?
That's true.
And the point of the sport also to remember one thing, and this is, see, it's fair to believe that every team plays to win, but once you've played long enough, you also realize that if you don't enjoy winning, if you don't enjoy the process, then you don't care about the winning, because there are other teams that will also win.
True.
Right?
True.
So what I've told many, many times before is that from basketball, I've learned so many things about what a team should be like, what your ambition should be like, what your goals should be like. How do you improve? How do you take criticism? Because basketball is not basketball, any sport, right? I keep saying this, sports are not meant to be subtle and gentle and, give you 20 years of, pats on the back for you to get better, right? So on my team, for example, we've played together for about a decade now. The team in Dubai. Right. These are my closest friends, right? But the day I don't play well, they could use the choicest words for the next hour, right?
To let you know.
And I would literally put my head down and say, I agree, right? I have to do better, right? There have been times where I was not in the best shape. My team asked me and they said, we're playing, so you must play. And my response was, I'm not ready. I won't help the team. I think you should go for someone else. And when I'm better, I'll come back, right? And there is no ill will.
Exactly.
If my team said that to me, I wouldn't ever feel bad. And this is what I've told my team here, right? If I ever sit across the table, or if you ever sat across the table, it's not just me, right? It's not about, like, in basketball, it doesn't need to be the captain who gives you...
True.
In the team, we have tried our best to make it an open enough setup where people can actually talk to each other and say, you know what you didn't work for us, right? I'm not saying that it can't be fixed, but I'm saying that it should be fixed as soon as we can, because otherwise we'll get into a rut of losing. The other part of it, which I feel has helped me massively, is how to take a loss. Right?
That's a good one.
Because in sports, you cannot always win. Like, nobody as a sportsman has never lost. And you can name anybody you think, right? You can think about Messi, Ronaldo, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, whoever. Like, if they won 6 championships, they lost 10, right? But those 10 did not put them down, right? They kept pushing. Same with what we do. I don't know how many people can say this with great confidence. I'm sure my team will back me on this, but there are days when we've had horrible, horrible days, right? And one of us has kind of massively screwed up. I have consciously told myself that my reaction to this cannot be anger, cannot be, immense frustration. It has to be a sit-down chat, right? It has to be multiple opportunities to fix it. But end of the day, like you rightly said, if it did not get fixed after whatever number of times, I'm sorry. I'll help you join another team, but it won't work here. Right? And I would put the same rule to myself. I would leave. Like, at any given time, if I think I'm not able to kind of manage, whatever, it's best for the team for me to leave.
So I want to then ask a more tactical question, right? Which is, a lot of people listening probably are at a point where they're definitely part of a team, but are most likely leading a team, if not leading multiple teams, right? You touched upon the fact that you've fostered a culture where it's quite transparent, right? As in, any conversation can be had. Someone who's listening, what kind of tactile steps can they take towards creating that if they don't have it?
I think, it's the whole thing about leading by example, right? The problem is, as leaders or as senior people on any team, you tend to kind of project this image of like a gladiator type thing, right? Like, I can't do wrong. I don't ever feel the stress, cannot make a mistake. I'm always smiling, right? And I feel that's the first kind of mistake we make, is that we try to create this impression of perfection, while our industry does not, like, there's literally no chance of you being perfect. You have to keep making mistakes. You keep learning every day. Doesn't matter how many years you've worked. Right. So for someone, like, what we first of all learned was that if I had to tell someone that this is how I want my team to be honest, the first step of that is for me to be honest, right? If I'm having a tough day, it's completely fine for me to say, I'm sorry, I'm having a tough day. I'm even going to extend saying, I have told my team, I'm sorry, but I can't be at work today. It's for whatever reason. Because I'm also telling them, you could also have the same, Sure. Just because you're on my team, or just because you're employed or you're junior level or whatever, does not mean that you have to make silly school kid-like excuses to take a day off. Right? And you've seen this enough.
Yeah.
I get sometimes audio messages at 7 a.m. saying, like a voice note, which sounds like someone's got a really bad throat, right? And they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't come. I'm like, I don't need that. Send me a voice, send me a message. I don't need anybody to prove that they're not well.
Right.
Because we did not employ kids.
Right.
This is not a school.
Right.
So if you are able to set an example, if you are able to project a certain level of honesty, you can expect that of everybody. If you cannot do that, then don't expect that of anybody. Right. So as a strategy, I would say first step is to, like, I want my studio to be a place where I am very comfortable in. Similarly, I want the studio to be very comfortable for everybody else in it. Right. But it can't be just by my standard.
Of course. Yeah. Makes sense. Very inspiring, I must say. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air almost.
No, I'm not joking. I'm trying. Sometimes even the people I'm trying to recruit don't believe me. They think I'm lying when I say I will actually never ask you why you didn't show up to work if you don't want to tell me. Right? Because I honestly don't think, I mean, work is important. Everything is important. But for an industry that loves to talk so much about health and wellness and, mental health and all of this stuff, we can't be running, like a school or a sweatshop.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So, and I think you touched upon it quite well, that we're not really hiring kids, right? Like at the end of the day, we're hiring professionals, so to speak. So yeah, interesting. So I kind of want to then maybe also ask, because I feel like we're going down a pretty good tangent, so I want to go down this road. You've obviously worked on a lot of projects, right? And like you said, in some cases, you got to take the L and move on, right? So what key learnings could you share with, I'm going to make it a bit specific so that it's not general, right? With the person who is a mid-level person leading a small team, right? What do you think they would probably stumble over, and what would you help them avoid?
So I think the one thing that plagues designers at every level is this ability to say, I know exactly what this thing is.
Yes, I know it always, all, bro. Right? I know it all.
Yeah, like I've done 50 residences and the next one is a spaceship and I'm like, sure, right, no problem. Right. Once I say yes, then I sit on the internet, you're like, wow, this is going to help me do everything, right? So one thing that I've personally learned, and because, so for example, when I came to Dubai first, I started working on a school project, right? I could have said that I've already worked for 10 years. Right. I've done enough work to think that I might be able to manage without a problem. But the first thing I realized was I don't know anything about designing a school. I know about spaces. I know about proportions, I know about materials, but I'm in a new market. Literally, education is different, right? Forget about what I know about design, but just the function is different. So I had to actually spend a lot of time beyond my working hours to first of all understand what schools were like here. Because once you've studied that, only then can you get better than what is on offer here, right? So it takes a lot of, I would say, courage especially after a certain level of years of working, to say, I'm sorry, but I don't know anything about this, right? And how can you kind of avoid that situation is by not necessarily having to learn about things only when you get to do them, right? So in design, it's critical that you keep your eyes open. Like, you've known me long enough. So if I see a project today that someone I know in the industry has done, right, and I'm fascinated by it and I don't know what that is, right, the next time I see them, I will ask them absolutely shamelessly. I'm like, I'm in love with what you did. And can you tell me more, right? I will become a student for the next hour listening to what they want to say. Because next time if something like that comes, I know a little better about it than I did yesterday. Right? So that would be one for sure, where it's something that I've learned from mistakes and I hope that others don't do the same thing. The other part of it is we tend to, because we're in a design industry, there's two kind of contradictions that happen. One is that if you work long enough, you start assuming the amount of time taken to do things, right? So if I've done something for 20 years like design, and somebody comes and tells me, how long does it take to do a layout? Generally, you would say like an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, whatever, space planning. Right. But it doesn't necessarily work that way.
True.
Sometimes the smallest thing can become a challenge because of the context and, the conditions and the brief and all that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've done everything but that situation. So it's still a new thing for you, right? So that's kind of the negative, right? So you rely on the experience to kind of presume something and it don't work. The other part of it is because you've done it for so long and you've done that same situation, that same problem before, you start applying the same rules on a problem, right? And I've done this, for example, like I said, I did one school and then I did another one. We've done, for example, one fantastic large office space and then we've done another one. And you start dealing with all problems as if it was a very objective problem that you're solving.
Right.
But in design, the problems might be the same. The answers can be very different based on who's asking. Right. So these are two things I feel is important. I've learned this a lot through doing multiple projects where you've realized that, okay, I know exactly what this problem is, but the answer that I had before doesn't work at all. Right. And I need to rethink the whole process. But the only benefit I have is that I've actually seen the situation, so it doesn't intimidate me. Like I'm comfortable understanding that I can solve this, but it needs thought.
I think the frameworks are important, right? That you actually kind of, I had a very similar problem with one of our projects last year. Never done the project before. Very, very similar to, your school project, wherein I had no idea even, yes, I know of basic spaces, of course. And just like you said, but in my case, it required a lot of, I found a sort of, I mean, of course you can learn about it, which is fine. I kind of found a little hack around it, which is I quite literally went to like the top like 5 designers in that field. And I was just like, listen, I need an hour of your time. I have this problem. Do you want to talk about it? And funny thing is, almost everyone said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I found it quite interesting that as an industry, is this like paradox, right? That everyone thinks that, oh, that's my competition. I can't share my knowledge with my competition because then my competition will get ahead. And I don't know how it is across the world, but I find that in Dubai, a category of designers, I'm not saying all of them, I would say maybe the top 10% of the industry, everyone is very open to share as much information as they can. Of course, they're not going down to things like commercial numbers and whatever, fine. But I have yet to find someone who said, no, I don't want to tell you that, or I choose not to tell you that, or anything like that.
But I think it's also because of the person you are. And this is in the sense that you have to build a system around yourself. You have to project yourself a certain way for people to understand this. And I've said this to many people, especially people just starting off here. This industry, this market will give you back as much as you give it, right? So if I decide I want to design sitting in an office and never look out,
right,
that's it. I'm never going to look out, right? But for example, if like when we met, the first time we met, before that, we'd known about each other, all of that. But you also had this, like, for example, you would know that it's okay, I can approach this person, right? How do you know that? They put themselves out there.
Right.
When you said top 10 or whatever number of people are approachable, there's probably 3,000 of them, right? Some of them have not had the opportunity of putting themselves out there. Some of them, of course, have said, I don't want to talk to people, right? I'm quite closed about things. But the larger picture usually is that, and I've said this to a lot of people, right? At times it takes courage. At times it takes a bit of shamelessness to go and tell people that, you know what, I don't know this, right? But also, our industry is full of people with, I mean, I know this could sound really bad, but this industry is full of people with really big egos. Right?
100%.
Which means that
I think that's any design industry, actually.
No, anyway. But I'm saying it's a smaller market here.
True.
Right? So it's easy to kind of get a massage very easily, right? So the reason I say this is because, it's the way you approach someone. Everybody loves it when somebody comes and asks them. Like if you came and asked me, you know what, Vijay, I love that other project you did. Can you tell me a little more? I'm generally going to be like, wow, really? Like
my ego is boosted.
Yeah. I feel so good. I'm going to tell you more and you'll be more in wow with whatever I said. So you have to use a lot of these things to make it work. But like you rightly said, I feel that design cannot survive on its own. I wouldn't have been in this industry for this long if I couldn't have spoken to other people about what they do, right? I don't think every single line that comes out of my office is like, oh, I don't need to look out, you're doing such amazing work. No. And I don't think any studio does that. But people need to cultivate that personality that you have, or what a lot of people in the industry now have, where they realize that unless you approach people and you approach them time and time again, potentially, because sometimes the first time you meet someone, they're a very high profile person, they might not even acknowledge you, right?
True.
And that's not a reflection of their personality. It's just that potentially either they've been approached many times, or for example, at that moment they were unavailable, whatever it may be, right? But if you do that long enough, then 100%, like you said, I can reach out to many people in the industry who are my friends now, and I can say, you know what, I saw this post somewhere, I love this project, can you tell me a little more, right? I've even told people that every time an awards or something happens, I'm fascinated by the amount of beautiful work that comes out, right? Sometimes, and for whatever privilege I have, I get to attend a lot of these events, but my team doesn't necessarily always do that, right? So I make it a point to come back and talk to the team about, look at this project. I literally open the nomination saying, sometimes they don't have all the information, so we find that information. I show them saying, look at this is so inspiring, right? Like it's a small studio, it's a large studio, but look, they're always doing great work.
True.
But it would be great if I could call that person and say, can you kind of tell us more? So it is doable, but it's not entirely easy, because when you said, right, like 10 top people are approachable, I'm sure a lot of people listening, and especially people who are new to Dubai, will start trying to reach out to those people to talk, and it might not necessarily be the nicest experience.
It's true, and funnily enough, it's weird you mentioned it. So one of the feedback, I suppose you can say, that we receive for the show, as in like the podcast, is that it helps exactly that, wherein I've received multiple messages from people who are like, I've always wanted to speak to so-and-so. I tried calling the landline, no one picked up. Tried, the hello@fancystudio.com email, no one responded. And I heard the podcast that they were on, and I heard them talk about some obscure coffee shop or whatever. And the next time I saw them, I went up to them and said, hey, you know what? I like that coffee from that coffee shop too. And instant rapport.
Icebreaker.
Instantly. And they were like, the guards were down and it was instant conversation. And the podcast kind of helped kind of curate that, which never thought it would happen. But I found it quite cool that
it can be as literal as me reaching out to somebody on your podcast. Because again, like I said, I meet people at events. Sometimes even I have so many people that I appreciate, I see their work, but I've not spoken to them. Right. And sometimes I might say that I might go to someone and say, you know what, I heard your podcast.
Exactly.
I heard you speak. It was beautiful, especially that part that you said, because that's certainly cheap. I can say this and I've not heard anything, right?
Exactly.
So I then pick something that I thought was really interesting and I bring that up.
Right.
But the thing is, the whole logic is you need to practice this a lot.
True.
Right?
True.
You can't be in a shell and then expect people to keep knocking on it for you to come out.
True. Very true. Interesting. So at this point in the episode is typically where we have kind of spoken about where you are at now. This is normally where I like to look forward. And I know that again, we briefly spoke about it. So essentially the question would be, what's next for Vijay?
I mean, at a personal level, I think I don't essentially look at the past and the future as kind of these steps that I have to cross.
Right.
Because I think this is like a very kind of continuous journey. So if you ask me like, how was 2025 or 2024 different from the year before, I don't think there was that hard line where I could say, yes, this is how it changed. Right?
This happened and then this ended and then this happened.
You of course can say things like, I used to work here, I left and I joined there or whatever. Right. But that's not how I look at my journey. Right? These are all small things, small details in the middle of that. But literally, if I talk to you about what my thoughts are, what I'm going to do in 2025, one was I've spoken about this a bit, where I've said I'm very keen on working with people who have the right mindset towards design, right? Over the last forever decade that I've been here, I've seen many, many different types of colleagues, friends, creative people, etc. And now I feel like I'm in a space where I know who I want to work with. I have the opportunity and the privilege of now being able to employ them. Right? Which is why, for example, I'm spending a lot of time finding those people and trying to get them on board so that we're able to kind of create a new team that can deliver high quality stuff. But more than that, I know it might sound quite ambitious and probably too large an ambition, but I think we want to create a studio where we do the things that we've been talking about for a long time. Like I personally have been speaking about things like, again, like I said before, mental health and what is the best workplace to work for, and what is creativity and what kind of, optimal standards you want to set. I'm not saying that on day 2, the projects that we do will be incredible. I'm saying, but on day 1, we can start living a certain design life, which kind of at least allows people to feel proud about, because I spent some part of my background. I was in Auroville in Pondicherry. I worked in Bangalore. I worked in other places. And I'll never forget the kind of joy I would have sitting in a studio in Auroville. Right. Not because every project we did was incredible, but because I honestly had a fabulous time just being there. Right. It was such a creative place where people were talking with a great level of honesty. People were open to ideas. People were open to backgrounds. People were honest enough, for example, that a whole studio of 8 or 10 people can sit together, irrespective of whether you're a 20, 21-year-old or a 50-year-old. You could all sit and talk about design by allowing the other person, an equal platform. Right. Because I think here, I'm sure you might have seen this, but here, and I think we spoke about this just before we started, a few people talk a lot.
True.
I'm potentially one of them. Right?
Probably me too.
No, but this is what I'm saying. The point is that why is it that when we sit in a group, like recently I was on a panel or something and we sat in a group and I told everybody before that, like, I don't like the fact that like I'm kind of telling you what I think and you kind of should think it's right. Yeah. Right? It's just an opinion. True. Right? We're not talking facts. I'm not giving you data
science
as such. Yeah. And I might keep saying things like, oh, there's a research at Harvard or whatever. But like, have I gone through that research? Have you ever seen that research? No. So I feel like my goal now is to build a team that actually lives that life. Design naturally for me is a very, very passion driven thing. So to an extent where, for example, I have had so many conversations with my team recently where we've spoken about how we want to literally think about design. Like I'm not talking about what we deliver. I'm not talking about the quality of drawing. That is a given. It has to be great, right? But when a client comes to your office, what do you think about? Right. What are you going to give him? When you meet somebody else from the industry, how do you project yourself? No, you don't lie.
True. True.
So that's the plan, to build a really solid team.
Interesting. I don't normally ask this question anymore on the show because I found like the answer became quite generic and quite boring for me personally. But I want to ask you this question, which is, I think this is something every designer thinks about subconsciously, especially if they're passionate. Imagine a utopian world, right? Perfect line, open checkbook, that kind of thing. What would be Vijay's dream project right now? Like if that hit your desk, you're like, guys, everyone stop what you're doing. This is it. What's that?
I think this is like an honest moment, right? Because so this is not right now. This has been forever, right? One way or the other, I have grown up looking up at a lot of certain type of projects. I've been inspired by a lot of public architects, etc. Right? I have never had the opportunity to work on a public project. Where I say, like for example, I've done hotels, I've done schools, whatever, but I don't consider those because they still are limited access.
Correct.
Right?
Like a truly public realm.
So at a basic level, for example, working on a project like the Louvre, or working on a like a museum, whatever, where people can, or even like a public space, right? One, because I feel it'll truly be a challenge to make something that a large part of the public that enters should be enjoying. Right. The other part of it is I'm fascinated by scales and proportions. We tend to do things very, but I've been to many places where I've suddenly walked into a space and like, oh my God, like how did someone think of this, right?
Yeah.
As a simple example, and again, this is not a public space as such, but one place that I remember had such a phenomenal kind of sensory impact on me, right? So when I first went to Auroville many years ago, somebody told me, let's go to this thing called Matra Mandir, which is like a spherical building there, right? I'm not the most religious person. I'm not like a very spiritual person or anything, but I was fascinated by the building itself. Right. And I said, I should give it a shot if I'm here. And I'm not joking. Like, I cannot tell you in what detail I know my first experience there. And I've been there so many times after that. But that place literally blew my mind into thinking, how did someone imagine this kind of impeccable space with that kind of proportion? And again, keeping everything else aside, forget the spirituality there and all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about architecture, space, volume, experience. Yeah. But from there on, I've been to many other places, had many opportunities to travel. And again, if you ask me any one project, it's not about the scale or whatever, but if it's a project that's open to an infinite number of people, if it's open access, right? Yeah. And if I have a contribution to make in that project, either as a lead designer there, or for example, collaborating with somebody else or whatever, I think that would really give me joy, because I think I think design truly can impact people.
It can.
And I feel like at times we become really good because we have such strong limited briefs to work on, where you know exactly who's going to use the space. So maybe you change those rules.
Yeah, like I don't know who my end client is anymore.
Like imagine if I said there was a project somewhere where your audience could be 50% rural, 50% urban. Your audience could be, this space could be for entertainment and education, but it would also be for commercial purposes. Imagine a brief that was that vague, where your research, would be immense just to understand what you had to design.
True.
Because we're used to having somebody tell us, 16 rules to the game, right? So yeah, that's, I think, what I've always thought was my dream.
Interesting. Actually, now that I think of it, I've only ever had that sort of experience once, and that was when I went to the Barcelona pavilion of Mies, right? And again, the thing is, studying over here, living over here, I've always read about it. I've always, seen pictures, studied plans, etc. But when you're actually there and you get like the side context and you realize what was happening at that time, and for this dude to suddenly go like, glass and green onyx and things like that, you're like, what was he thinking? And so like that was one. And then I had this beautiful moment where there was this family next to me as I was kind of like, spiritually breaking down at this awesomeness. Two architects who were basically telling their kids about how they were there when the original pavilion was built and how this is like a reflection of that. And they had such a beautiful moment in this public space. And I was like, this is what this can do, if it's done correctly, of course. It like gives me goosebumps even talking about it. But it has the power to do that to a complete like random person,
who would have thought that, so many years later, there'll be this guy who just walks in and is blown away by something like that. And again, I don't think, irrespective of what we all do here. And again, this is an industry where every year we get, a lot of applause for what we do.
A pat on the back.
Right? It's way more than a pat on the back, right? We become like stars every year. But again, I'm very careful in saying this, but there's a lot of really, really beautiful and really impactful projects happening in the Middle East, 110% without doubt, but not everything happens with that impact.
Right.
So if you think about the projects that you said, right, like for example, I was at the Vitra Museum some time ago and have always like been fascinated by minimalism and Japanese architecture. And then suddenly I'm in a building that Tadawando has designed, right? And I'm literally standing there touching the wall thinking, oh my God, like someday he's touched this. And it's a fangirl moment, right? But it was not a fascination for the person.
Right.
Like for example, I don't think I'm into that kind of thing where anything that he did had to be amazing.
Right.
I think I have developed a rationale where I will look at a project, understand what they did, love the proportions or not, whatever, and then appreciate it.
Right.
But there are some people who manage to do that time and time again, and then they become legends. But yeah, there's a few type of buildings and projects where, like you said, you go in and there's literally a moment where you're thinking, this is exactly why I wanted to do what I did, because only because of my education, my background, my thought process, do I now enjoy this space. So yeah.
That's a very good way to put it, that you actually, much like someone would enjoy a good meal or someone would enjoy a good drive, I think as designers, that's true. I've never really thought of it that way. You actually can enjoy a space.
No, because you've been to the same spaces with your family.
True.
Right?
True.
Like a very silly example was I went to the Louvre with my wife and some friends and etc. Right? And then once before I'd been with an architect who I'd worked with, Martin from Edge. Right? And I remember walking in and honestly, it took me about 45 minutes before I actually looked at anything that was on display. Right? Like I was just fascinated by wall, floor, hinge, handle, whatever, right?
Floor termination details.
Everything.
I know exactly.
And it's a touch thing, right? So I'm like an idiot. You're sitting on the floor touching the thing. Like, how did they do this, right?
Right.
And again, to some it seems silly, but if you've been trained to think a certain way, it's like you said about the food.
Yeah.
Like I might go and eat the most amazing meal somewhere, like Michelin star, whatever, and I might just come out of that saying, oh my God, that was great, it was heavenly, this and that, right? But imagine someone who's trained as a chef for 20 years and he still feels that about that food.
Exactly.
You would then say that food is really incredible.
100%.
Right? Because he knows what ingredients went in. He knows the effort that went in, right? He knows that there is, like, for example, architects tend to put surprises somewhere, right?
Right.
Sometimes you design a building or a space and you're like, I want to do something which, the minute somebody sees it.
Only someone who knows would.
Exactly. Like you will pick it up. So I feel that only happens in some spaces. And if the building is not public, then it doesn't happen at all.
True.
Because then someone's using that space every day.
True. Makes sense. Vijay, I feel like we can speak forever, man.
Yeah, true. It's a Friday. So.
But for the sake of our listeners, I think we should bring a close to this particular episode. But
absolutely,
I have no doubt that you will be on again in the future.
100%.
And as you are aware, we have something called the aForm tradition. At this point, I think I don't need to introduce it anymore because everyone seems to know what it is. So I'll just directly go to your question. The question that you have
before you start, do I get to know who's asked or?
No, you don't get to know who's asked.
Okay. I have to find out.
You could find out. Okay. Or someone will reach out to you and be like, that was my question.
Okay.
So the question that you have today is, if architects and designers had their own reality show, what would it be called? You can take your time about this.
What would they call it?
Yes. If they had their own reality show, what would was it their own? Hold on, let me reconfirm this.
Like
if architects and designers had their own reality show, if Frank Guy had his own show or whoever had their own show, if Vijay had his own reality show, what would it be called?
For someone who literally does not watch reality shows at all, like I have a certain, unless it's, I don't know, about someone dying on TV or something. No, I'm just joking. But
an architect's reality show, dude, I would watch that. Like I'd watch like Foster,
But I can't imagine, it's not about the name, but I can't imagine what you would do, like on a reality show, unless it becomes a silly competition or something. But
true.
I don't know, like I don't even know what other reality show is called for me to come up with a name for this. Might sound completely silly, but something like, I don't know, Death or Detail, or I don't know.
Ooh, I got one.
Death or Design, or I don't know. Like, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with death, because I feel reality means that, like somebody has to die on a show.
Reality is that someone is dying.
No, it's not like, when somebody says reality show, I feel it's like, it's beyond the game, right? It's not like a simple thing of, I'm more about a Survivor series or something.
Gotcha.
But yeah, no, I mean, I first of all, I think architects, I think architects or designers might not be, like, I've seen a lot of these design shows or whatever on Netflix and other places. I've seen them for about, on an average, like 5 minutes per series.
Right.
And I've given up, right? Because I don't think that's design happening there. I mean, maybe I've not seen the right ones, but a lot of them that start kind of popping up when you search, it's, you've seen like these makeover things or whatever else that they show. And I'm like, really, this is just projecting a completely disastrous image of what we do.
Correct.
And hence, for example, I feel like I don't think we are that kind of, like we are people who think.
Right.
Like we are, like, I would generally think that one of the strongest characteristics that we have is a certain process that we follow. Architecture is not instinctive at that level. Like you might come up with an idea as an instinct,
right,
but you will, dissect it to death before you actually implement it.
True.
Right?
True.
I think reality shows don't give you that time. Right?
No, not really.
So most of either most of us will be exposed that we don't get any instinctive ideas.
Exactly.
So but I think it has to be design, detail, whatever, or death. Like I'm more keen on the
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I thought of one. Blurred lines.
So I'm going to put you on a spot now. I'll change who the host is, right? What would happen on blurred lines?
So I have a whole intro and everything, right?
Unless
this is like my podcast.
See, if you give me a very reasonable answer, I would think that question was not somebody else's.
Damn it.
Yeah.
No, like in my mind, it would be almost like, I mean, again, I know of reality shows, right?
Yeah.
I can't think of the last time I've seen one even. But in my mind, it's kind of more like vlog style of kind of not edited type content. That's what I think it would be. And I would think it would be kind of just a camera moving around that one individual all day. Even if it was like a 3-hour like Zoom call, the camera just kind of like plopped there in the corner, kind of just recording everything. And it would be kind of almost a day in the life of an architect all day, every day. And therefore blurred lines. This week on Blurred Lines.
I like the name. The name sounds very cool.
It's not my question, I promise.
No, but I also feel that as architects, right, or designers. So if you told me that somebody was going to secretly record what my day was, I think it'll be pretty boring, right?
But I think that's the point of it, right? Like,
no, in a sense, it won't be great for TV. Right? It's not like fantastic. Like you don't sit for, like you don't binge watch an architect's day.
Yeah, true.
But you also know that we are fantastic performers.
That's also
so
true.
So if the camera is not hidden, then it's going to be a phenomenal TV show because we will do everything needed to make it popular. Right?
True.
But it's a really good question. I don't know who asked it, but it really stumped me because first of all, like either someone knows that I've not watched a reality show or whatever, but
I trust you. I can guarantee you this person did not know that you were coming on.
No, but they also, or I'm just amazed by the fact that most architects don't watch because then that's why it's such a tough question to answer. But no, it's a very good question. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Vijay, thank you so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure.
I keep saying it again and again, but I will say it that the show is only possible because of people like yourself donating time. And what we're trying to do with the show is obviously add value to everyone listening. And I have no doubt that we achieved that today. So thank you so much. And we hope to have you on in the future.
Well, I'll always be ready.
Awesome. And for the rest of you guys, we will catch you guys next week. Fellow aFormer, thank you so much for your time. If this episode added any value to you, please share it with anyone who may benefit. If you want to carry on the discussion, please get in touch with us over socials. We are at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. That is at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. Until next time, stay inspired.